Okay, I have been asked to do a basic centering and a simple vessel demonstration. Some of the demonstrations, some of the videos I've posted have been kind of complicated items. So this is going to be simple centering, a little bit about setup. I'm throwing right-handed. My foot is on a brick and my foot pedal is on my left foot because of all the shaping and curving and pulling I'm doing is over here. I want this leg to be fixed. I don't have to take it on and off with the foot pedal. So I want this foot fixed in a set position so I can draw from the strength of my leg to do my work. Now, centering, you'll notice this is a good opportunity for you to learn how to throw clean. I'm about as close to the wheel as you can possibly get. Splash pan's off. You can draw a line through my knees, right through the piece of clay. Centering is not done at full speed. I know a lot of us are taught that way. Centering is not done with a lot of water. The only place you need water is between your hand and the clay. So if it's flying everywhere, if it's landing on the floor all over yourself, then that's water you did not need. So centering is done with just enough water between your hands and the clay. About medium speed. This hand is going to do most of the work. You'll notice I don't cone up like some potters do. I just found that's an unnecessary step. And this is probably going to save you a lot of time and make your throwing a little faster. Your sponge holds this much water. To center, I just need this much. Okay, here we go. Elbow, left elbow on the thigh. This is where you're going to draw your strength from, right here. At medium speed, that much water. Okay? You hold a position, and then you relax. A little bit of coning is going to happen naturally because you're applying most of your pressure right here. Okay? This is where most of your centering takes place. Just so you get a good view of that, I'm not going to center. I'm going to center it just using my left hand. Okay? You put your hand in a fixed position, hold it. If it's held firmly, then the clay has to submit to it. And then that portion is centered. Then you can begin to work to the top portion. Okay? Center here, pushing down on that leg, drawing from the strength of my left leg. Hold the position. Relax. Again, let's knock it off. Okay, we do it with the left hand just to show you. This does most of the work. When I'm centering, I'm using both hands. I'm thinking 90% of my centering happens right here. Okay? So I can feel the pressure maxed here, distributed around my fingers. The clay has to submit. I relax. I spin my wrist just a little bit. Come down on top, push down. One of the reasons I love doing most of the work with the left hand is because it takes a lot of the stress off of your wrist. Your energy is moving around the wheel. If I'm centering with my right hand, what happens is the energy is pushing the hand this direction. So it's putting a lot of strain on the wrist. Now if you're working with small batches of clay and soft clay, you're not going to have much of a problem. But if you're going stiffer clay and larger pieces, you're going to have a lot less injury if the energy comes around the clay, around the wheel, it's translated directly to this part of your hand, it bypasses the wrist and goes directly down the forearm. So you're going to have a lot less stress on your wrist if you center this way. Now again, normally I use two hands, and this is what that looks like. Establish a position, hold it. This part of my base of my thumb, I roll it over, and I push it down. And I'm centered. So it's a lot easier than the way I was taught. And it's just been a process of learning and discovering that not everything that we're taught is always the best way to operate. All right, now I'm going to go inside and start making this a vessel. Hands are connected as often as possible. So I got my hands on my forearms on my thighs, forming a triangle here. Just the tiniest amount of water. I mean, there's barely any water in that sponge. It's all you need to go down the center. And because I come at this angle, it's kind of like a stadium, a bowl shape. From here, again, hands connected, I just take my fingers laying on top of each other from different hands and just curl my fingers back. Not going to make anything fancy right now. Just going to pull a cylinder, do some mild shaping. So that's done. Now I can begin to move the clay up. And the way I do it, again, anytime I can keep my hands connected, the better, stronger. I'm leaning forward. This thumb is going to be the driving point. And I'm going to grab the clay here. I'm going to pull it up toward an invisible point right about here. I'm going to run out of clay before I get to it. Now this is strong, but if I combine it with this hand with a sponge, it's stronger, and these two, see how they're arranged? Clay contacts here. With the damp sponge, I'm going to drive the clay up. This is what it looks like. Now the inside pressure is doing virtually nothing, or maybe just a little. The inside pressure provides a stop where the outside pressure runs up to. You make an indentation and you move that up. And you can see the mechanics of the leg as the hand moves up, the elbow pivots down over the thigh. You can see how I'm drawing from the strength from my leg to do this. This is only 2 pounds of clay. When you start getting into bigger batches of clay, that position becomes more and more important. Okay? Now I'm changing my position. My left elbow comes up. I reach in, make an indentation. If it dries out, I wet it, come back, pull it up. As soon as my hands can connect, that thumb comes out and makes contact, and they come up as a unit. You notice that the inside pressure is above the outside pressure. Like this. So you're forcing the clay through in this S shape. You're squeezing the clay through an uncomfortable position, which translates into height. I'm going to pull it up a little higher. Again, elbow straight up. The forearm is wedged between my gut and the thigh. Watch this move here. I'm going to indent. This is where a lot of you guys, if you learn this trick, you're going to get an extra couple inches out of your vessels. Push in. And this comes straight up. The left hand, left contact point on the inside. See, it's above the outside. They come up together. At this point, the inside just remains as a stop. The outside just runs up alongside of it. This keeps it from flaring out. You'll see a lot of potters, they naturally flare out, and then they have to come back in and choke it back in. You can avoid that by switching your position for those top 2 inches. Okay, now that I have a cylinder, I don't need to go any taller. It's about maxed out. I'm just going to give it some brief expansion here. The points of contact are now opposing each other. In other words, they're point to point. They're not one above the other. And I'm just slightly pressing out on the inside. Now look at my points of contact. I got minimum points of contact here and minimum here. I got a little bit riding on this side here. I got my elbow up, so that's as minimal as I can make it. That allows me to do the maximum amount of shaping without twisting the cylinder. I can do that again, or I can go ahead and put a rib on it. Some of you have asked me, how do I get my vessel so smooth? When you buy this tool, it has a point on it. First thing I do is I get a piece of sandpaper and I'll just sand it where I get a little bit of a flat area here. That's very important because you don't want this to be sharp. You want it to be flat. I jam this corner into the bottom of the cylinder. My inside finger is right here. It's going to move to here, and then they're going to both move together, and then you'll see I'm going to end up in this position where the shoulder will be. You have to rotate it this way, otherwise the rib will stick into the club. So you can see the inside finger is moving up the rib. Now the rib and the inside finger are moving together. The rib rotates. I can actually take it all the way up and just compress it, get some of that excess water off. Okay? You can see, just making a basic cylinder, altering it just slightly, you have an infinite number of possibilities with what you have right here. Give it a little choking here. Establish a curve. Like that. And after trimming off your top, this is pretty close, so I'll go ahead and trim it anyway. If it's straight up and down, you would cut this way. But if it's laid out, you would cut this way. Okay? Just trim off the excess. Okay. Smooth it out. Some people like to use a chamois. I just like using a sponge in my skin. Water. Again, this is your basic face form. Nothing fancy, but an infinite number of possibilities you can do with this. Let's take it off the wheel. I'm going to make another vessel. I'm going to move a lot quicker with the second one. You notice that if you do a lot of torching, you don't have to use a wire because the pot just pops right off. Okay. Again, 2 pounds of clay. This is a Corian bat, and I like the Corian because it withstands heat. And since I do a lot of torching, it has developed some surface cracks. If you don't cook it with your torch, this bat will last forever. Makes a great surface. But when you use Corian, you gotta try to get all the water off of it before you slap your clay down, because the material is so dense that just the slightest amount of water on your bat, you slap your clay down and the clay wants to slide right off. So you really want the bat to be almost dry or thoroughly dry before you slap your clay down. Other surfaces you gotta have a little bit of water. Okay, so here we go, centering again. This is how I center everything. Okay? Basic. Establish a position, hold that position. The clay has to give into it. So get it as quickly as possible to the position you need it to be in and start throwing. Okay. I'm going to go with a little wider form this time. Straight up. Again, grabbing it like a handle, this is going to do 90%, 95% of the work in driving it straight up. It's connected with this hand with the sponge, make an indentation, start moving straight up. Very little pressure on the inside. Common mistake when you're learning is to be pushing through on the inside and you end up pinching the clay and it begins to tear. Everybody's done it. If you can get that in your head, especially that first pull, then almost all of your pressure, that first pull is going to be outside pressure. Okay, make an indentation. Forcefully making an indentation. That's how you're going to get the most out of your clay. See how my knee moves in as the elbow drops. By incorporating the rest of your body, in particular, your lower body, your legs, the strength of your legs, the more you can incorporate the strength of your legs, the less injury you're going to have, and the longer you'll be longer you'll be potting. Alright. Grab this last little bit down here. It's like a scoop. You're scooping the clay, bringing it up. I think I said I was going to make a wider form, and then I forgot. Anyhow, it's the same. Just position back a little further to make a wider form. This is going to be narrow also. Okay. I'm going to hit it with the rib now. Again, minimal contact. Try not to hold the rib against the clay this way. Just turning it slightly will reduce the amount of contact you make with the clay and will reduce the amount of twisting and torquing that'll be. Another mistake I see potters make is that they always feel that they have to keep moving through the form, especially when you're shaping. If there's an area where you feel like you're not happy with it, back up, hold it, stay there, barely applying pressure, but hold it until you're satisfied with it, and then move on. There's no rule that says you have to keep moving. Some clays do respond a lot better than other clays. And of course, the softer the clay, the more easily it will respond. However, then the trade-off is the softer the clay, the less strength it's going to have, and the less height you can get. So I would always encourage you to try a clay that's a little stiffer. Of course, not too stiff. You don't want to hurt yourself. But you'd be surprised how much more height you can get, how much more breadth you can get if the clay is a little stiffer. And you can always use a torch. This guy. Stiffened up a portion of the vessel. If I was afraid the bottom half of this was going to be too soft and collapse, I would just hit it with some heat. So all this is, all you're seeing is a modified cylinder. They taught us that correctly. And if you can make a really good cylinder over and over and over again, you're on your way to becoming a good potter. And that's true. All you're seeing is a cylinder. I gave it a little bit of breath here, a little bit of choking and shaping here, and that's what we have so far. And you can play with it. Some of your best tools are going to be right here. Do something I haven't done before. Okay, if you have any questions, just shoot me a message. Try to incorporate as much as you can from what I've showed you. It may be very different from the way you were taught. Try to incorporate little bits and pieces at a time. If you're a new potter, you have the advantage of not having to unlearn some things. I had to unlearn a lot of things to learn better technique from the way I was originally taught. So if you're a new potter, this is a great way to get started. Try to approach the clay just as I did, and you'll be surprised. It's a lot easier. You still got to practice. You still got to put in a lot of mileage to figure this material out. But if you have proper technique, it'll make it a lot easier, a lot less frustrating for you. Okay? Thanks a lot.